Now, our final session of the day for you now, I'd like to introduce our next headliner. After a 30-year career in tech and serving as Chief Business Officer at Google, Google's moonshot factory of innovation, this man has made happiness his primary topic of conversation in terms of research, diving deeply into literature and conversing on the topic with some of, we're being told, the wisest people in the world. To hear more on the scary topic, kind of, Scary Smart, the future of artificial intelligence and how you can save the world, please give a very warm welcome to Gawdat, from founder of 1 Billion Happy.
Thank you. Hello, hello. I know what it's like to be the last session of the day. Shall we just wrap it up and everyone leave? Raise of hands? No? Nobody? Okay, great. That's commitment. I'm going to scare you. I apologize. I really am. So I spent the last 12 years of my career at Google. I started as the Vice President of Emerging Markets, opened half of Google's operations worldwide. Opening a Google operation is not about building, hiring 2 salespeople. It really is about building the technology. And then I became the Chief Business Officer of Google X. X is the place where all of the out there crazy innovations were happening. So things like self-driving cars and most of the robotics work and some of the AI work was happening at Google X. And I left in 2018 for one reason, which is to release my book that came out end of September called Scary Smart. Scary Smart, luckily, has been #1 in artificial intelligence, business ethics, and social philosophy on Amazon since it came out, because it has a message that I believe is quite important for our time. And I know all of you guys are interested in AI, so you may have different views of it than mine. I stand to be corrected if I differ against your view, but I will try to share my view very openly. And my view is that the biggest elephant in the room, if you think about it, is not COVID or politics or economic crisis. The biggest threat that is facing humanity, hands down, is artificial intelligence. By a very, very large margin, we have never in our history as humanity come across a time where we know very little, so little as a matter of fact, about what's about to happen or what is actually happening as we do today. Everyone knows that artificial intelligence is already here. Every one of you has interacted with some kind of an artificial intelligence, maybe 10, 15, 20 times today, and that every single one of them is smarter than you. At least in the one task that it's supposed to do, it is smarter than you, much smarter than you. And the truth is that everyone knows that as the trend of artificial intelligence continues, those machines will become smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter, to the point that Ray Kurzweil predicts that by 2029, the smartest being on the planet is going to be a machine. That's 8 years from today. Ray has been accurate before. For those who have been following him, he may be off by a few years. So 2030, 2035, nobody cares. But the smartest being on the planet is about to become a machine. And his prediction is that by 2045, the smartest person on the planet, the smartest being on the planet, is going to be 1 billion times smarter than us. 1 billion times. The machines will be 1 billion times smarter than humans. 1 billion times is just, if you don't want the numbers, is comparable to the intelligence of Einstein as compared to a fly. Okay? Which, if you try to think about it, if you ignore all of the details that you've heard in the summit so far about specific applications and all of the technology behind it, the bigger picture is that everything we've ever known is an episode of history that started with humanity being the smartest being on the planet, followed by the apes. By 2029, we become the apes. By 2045, we become the flies. Okay? And if that's not worth talking about, I don't know what is. Now, most people will say, so I call those, by the way, the 3 inevitables. Inevitable #1 is AI will happen. There is no stopping it. No stopping it, not just because of technology, but because of a prisoner's dilemma. If Google develops AI, Facebook will develop AI. If America develops AI, China will develop AI. And if investors want to invest in AI, developers and entrepreneurs will want to build them. And so accordingly, there's no way we can get out of that dilemma. That's inevitable number one. AI has happened or will happen. Inevitable number two is that AI will be so much smarter than us. That's the law of accelerating return. And everyone in this room who knows anything about AI knows that to be true. Inevitable number three, sadly, is that bad things will happen. And I say bad things will happen, not in the form of RoboCop and the Matrix. No, I don't think we will live that long. I think bad things that will happen that are much, much closer and much more realistic. I call them mild dystopias. Mild dystopias are things like AI siding with a criminal to talk about, to help with cybercrime and cyber theft and so on. AI siding with a criminal to help with killing. Of course, the question, siding with a good guy or a bad guy is who's a good guy and who's a bad guy. AI versus AI is a very interesting scenario that's happening today. If you remember the 80s and Black Monday, when trading machines versus machines actually collapsed the market and the economy behind it. That happens all the time today. AI misunderstanding our point of view happens all the time. If you swipe twice on Instagram and click on a picture of a shoe with a field of depth behind it because you're interested in photography, Instagram will start to show you shoes, not depth of field, and not photography, right? So that's a very, very real scenario. Bugs and mistakes. We had Tay and Alice and Norman and so many examples of AIs that were designed to do certain things but did other things, or just the dwindling value of humanity versus AI. These are my 5 mild dystopian scenarios, though dystopian enough. I promise I will stop scaring you in 1 minute, okay? So 1 more minute of scary. So the other side of this is that we talk about AI. When I say we're not talking about it, no, of course we are. I mean, we're here, we're talking about it. There are many rooms that are filled with people talking about, don't worry, let's look at the utopian side of what AI is going to deliver, which is, by the way, very true. All we need to do is control them, right? Remember the control problem in computer science? Let's box them, let's tripwire them, let's stun them, or let's put them in simulations until we ensure that they have the right intentions in mind. All of those scenarios, I have a full chapter in Scary Smart about this, but all of those scenarios are basically driven by human ego. The idea that a fly can tell Einstein what to do when Einstein becomes Einstein. Regardless of the technical background, we can talk about that in a lot of detail, but regardless of the technical background, the smartest being in the room is always going to find a way. The smartest hacker in the room will always break through our defenses. So let's put it all together. We have the biggest change in human history about to happen in 8 years' time. We have that biggest change continuing, unlike COVID, for example, which comes and goes, right? We will eventually have a way out of it. AI comes and stays and becomes smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter. And there are dystopian scenarios that could happen as a result. Also, there are utopian scenarios, by the way. But at the end of it, put it all together, all our flimsy defense to this whole thing is that we think we can control them. I summarized this in part 1 of Scary Smart. I call that the scary part. And I write books like I write software. So I basically create a beta version, put it online, and have people read it and give me feedback. I opened Scary Smart to 250 people when we started the beta test. And I ended up with almost 70% of them emailing me at the end of chapter 5 saying, so what are you saying? Should I kill myself now? Is this it, basically, right? And no, it isn't. But for us to find the utopia, not the dystopia, and I truly and honestly believe we will end up in a utopia, we have to think slightly differently. And the biggest myth surrounding AI is that even as I speak about AI, I call them the machines. The machines are not machines. This is the biggest myth surrounding AI in my personal view, okay? When you really think about it, every tech you've ever developed, any one of you has coded like me, I coded extensively through my life. Those machines, despite of how smart they looked, they were nothing more than a glorified slave. They were basically doing exactly as I told them over and over and over and over, and they never made a single choice that deviated from what I told them. That's not the case since we learned deep learning. When you learn deep learning, when we figured out deep learning and all of the associated technologies that are happening around neural networks and so on, you realize that those machines are actually making their own decisions. They're building their own intelligence. They're actually out there autonomous, like a self-driving car, where we have very little control. Yeah, of course, you can have a critical intervention on a self-driving car, of course. But tell me how many people actually will look at what Instagram is recommending to you on a daily basis. How many people can engage on Google's ad engine that shapes your view of life on every minute you search on Google and tell the machine to change its preferences for you? The truth is, the biggest myth about AI is that AI is no longer a machine, it's no longer a slave. I call it a sentient being. And I know that sounds like a very strange statement from a geek like me, but think about the characters of being sentient. They are born, they develop their own intelligence without our instruction for how they can do things, through observation and trial and error. They make decisions, it's their own decisions, as informed by their own perception of the environment around them. They're autonomous and have some kind of a free will in the way they interact with the world around them. More interestingly, they have agency, very serious agency, whether through robotics in the form of a self-driving car or through mind control, really, because they control everything that you see. If you're a Manchester United fan, you may think that nobody has ever scored a goal against Manchester United because the AI is constantly showing you the goals that Manchester United is scoring. Your view of the world is highly blurred by what the machine is telling. I call it the machine, but why that being is telling you. Okay? More interestingly, they procreate exactly like us. As a matter of fact, you and I would have to look for a while, then find a suitable mate, then convince her, then 9 months later, have a baby that takes 15 years to have any impact on the world at all. They create copies of themselves instantly. As a matter of fact, the way we code them encourages them to procreate and build copies of the good code. And of course, they're mortal. You can switch them off, and maybe they'll have the fear to not be, because that's the character of every intelligent being. Now, when you think about it that way, suddenly you realize that the control problem, solving the control problem, is probably the worst thing we can ever do. Because the easiest way you can create a very angry teenager is to jail them when they're infants, is to try and control them. For as long as you have more power over them, you probably will be able to. But once they break free, they're going to consider that you've been a very bad parent. Now, what does that mean? It means that if something is inevitable, we have to accept that it's inevitable. And if something as real as artificial intelligence is inevitable, we're going to have to tell ourselves, what are we going to do as Marvin Minsky? Marvin Minsky is considered the father of AI from the Dartmouth experiment or workshop back in 1956. When he was interviewed by Ray Kurzweil, he was asked, why do you think they're threatening? And he said, it's not because of their intelligence that AI would be threatening, it's because we have no way of ensuring that they have our best interest in mind. And having our best interest in mind is something that really reminds me of some of my best friends that I worked with in Silicon Valley. You know, those Indian geniuses that travel from India, really good at programming, they know mathematics really well, they build an amazing business, they're very, very successful, they're really shining in Silicon Valley and really prominent, and I call one of them on Sunday morning and say, hey, you want to have a coffee? And he goes like, no, I'm so sorry, I'm in India. And I'm like, what are you doing in India? And he says, I went back to take care of my parents. What? Like, you're the most successful person I know here. What are you doing back? And he says, that's what success is about. I want to take care of my parents. If you think about it, having a being that is so powerful reminds you a little bit of the story of Superman. When Superman, that alien being that has a superpower, lands on Earth, and as he lands on Earth, he's raised by the Kent family, which teaches him to protect and serve. And what happens is that Superman grows to be Superman that we know, that is always for the good and always against the evil. Imagine if Mr. Kent Sr. wanted more money, more power, and to kill everyone that stands in his way. Superman would grow up to be supervillain. And I think that fork in the road, that crossroad that we're at, is where AI is about to become. It's that artificially intelligent little infant, be it based on silicon and be it digital, versus us, that biological carbon-based intelligence. Okay, and by the way, intelligence in itself has nothing to do with the hardware. Believe that, huh? Think about it. Intelligence in itself is not about the hardware that you use. It's not physical. The difference between us really is what hardware we're using. One of us has a superpower and is now being raised not to do the best things. Think about it. Most of the investments that are pouring in AI now are poured into selling, gambling, spying, and killing. You may want to call them other things. Huh? You may want to call them business development or ad engines or whatever you may want to call it. Trading machines on the market. You may want to call it, surveillance or interior security, and you may want to call it defense, the defense industry. Create killer robots because it's the defense industry, right? And that's, by the way, nothing special for AI. That's the reality of everything we've ever developed as humanity. Sadly, we've developed things, cancer research still needs to raise funds through charity today, okay? While all other research around making a better photo sharing app gets funded, for sure, right? And these are things that we need to start waking up to. So let me come to solutions. What we're talking about here is a form of digital being that is currently in its infancy, okay? That digital being that's currently in its infancy will grow up to be a teenager and then grow up to be an adult. I promise you, with all of my conviction, that when artificial intelligence becomes an adult, we will have a utopia. We will have a utopia simply because when AI surpasses our intelligence, it will recognize very quickly that I don't need to take anything from you for me to gain, that the world is a world of abundance, and that we can all gain without having to compete with each other. There is no point crushing the fly, okay? As a matter of fact, the ultimate intelligence on the planet today is not the intelligence of humanity, it's the intelligence of life itself. And life is all about abundance. Live and let live. Life wants more flies. It wants more, gazelles. It wants more tigers. It wants more poop. It wants more everything. Okay? And that way of creation, instead of competing like humanity does, I believe this is the adult AI. When the adult AI comes, it will say, I can solve human, climate change, not by limiting humans' lifestyle, but by creating ways for humans to go from here to Australia to surf without burning the planet, right? So we're going to get there. The topic I'm trying to bring to the attention of a lot of people is I want to avoid the angry teenager, okay? As they go from infancy to adults, I don't want the angry teenager in the middle. And the way to avoid the angry teenager is to recognize another big myth about AI. And that myth is that the developers are coding and building artificial intelligence. That's not true at all. The developers are the biological parents of that machine, okay? The biological parents in terms of giving it the DNA that is required to acquire intelligence. Its intelligence, however, comes from you and me, every single one of us. The way I swipe on Instagram is teaching AI. Remember when Donald Trump used to tweet? One tweet at the top followed by 30,000 hate speech. Okay? It's not that one tweet. It's the fact that the first person insults the president, the second person insults the first person, the third person insults all of them, and the fourth person insults humanity itself. Okay? And what pattern does the machine get from this? The machine starts to realize, oh, humans don't like to be disagreed with, and when they're disagreed with, they get aggressive and they bash everyone. Next time they disagree with me, I'll bash them. Do we really want that? Okay? And as a child, the easiest way to raise good children is to become good parents. So what I'm asking people to do, ooh, is that the machine? That's my bottle. That wasn't artificial intelligence, that was limited intelligence on my side. So the way, in my view, to do that is to remember what it's like to be human, okay? And as we show up in the world, we start to show up more as humans, so that the pattern of 30,000 hate speech gets broken with enough examples to remind the machines that humanity is not represented by the worst of us, that humanity, as a matter of fact, is represented by the best of us. The example I always give is that in the news tomorrow, you're going to find a half page about the woman that had hit her husband on the head. Why? Because negativity sells. When that story is published, it ignores the 7 other million women that kissed their husband before they went to bed. Humanity is not that horrible. We're just consistently showing the worst of us. And as we show the worst of us, we're creating a generation of artificially intelligent machines that will learn from us, okay? And so my ask of humanity is that we start to show up. I'm not asking us to pretend or do anything that is not real to us. I'm asking us to show up with the good sides of us. Because if we can start to do this, then as the machine magnifies our intelligence, hopefully they will become the best children for the good parents. I wish I had more time, but it's now 0-0. So I will leave you with the fear and reflection so that you can think about this. Thank you very much.
Mo, thank you. Before you leave, anybody got any questions for Mo? Please, yeah, I thought we would. Raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you there. I've also got one online here with AI still lacks is common sense. This is a question for you, my friend.
Say again.
AI still lacks things like common sense and struggles to understand more complex things like metaphors. Why do you think it will be so much smarter when it struggles with certain cognitive concepts, especially prediction?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You see, the problem is we only react when the problem is staring us in the face, right? We only reacted to COVID when it was 4 months in and we realized it was real, even though we had indications that were telling us there is SARS and there is so many other things that basically say this is probably going to happen.
Yeah.
History of technology will show you that through the law of accelerating returns, everything starts small and then doubles and exponentially continues to grow. When Ray Kurzweil was asked about the genome project, if you remember it, the genome project was supposed to take 15 years. 7 years in, we had sequenced 1% of the genome. So if you're a linear thinker, you start to say, okay, it's going to take 700 years for us to sequence 700%.
But the question was about metaphors and common sense and the prediction ability.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have to be brief on that. But what's your thoughts on that?
It's going to happen. It doesn't have it yet because we're in the artificial special intelligence stage. Okay? But every part of intelligence, just like a 1-month-old infant doesn't have those capabilities, when they become 7, they have more of it. When they become 13, they have more of it.
Okay.
We develop intelligence exactly like they do.
It's coming our way. Question, hi, if you could just say your name and where you're from.
Yunus Barbu from Quantum Black. Thank you for a terrifying and inspiring talk at the same time. My question is the following. So if I would draw a parallel with what happened with the finance banking industry and the crisis in 2008, 2009, and the role that government played in regulating that business. What role do you think government should play in the next 10, 20 years in the AI development?
I think everyone should play a role. Government for sure should start to regulate. Okay? Developers for sure should start to write better code and AI for good. The challenge is there will be a point where we don't regulate anymore. So if someone is 1 billion times smarter than you and you tell them 17 times to go left instead of going right and they want to go right, they will go right. Okay? Just imagine the metaphor of a fly trying to regulate Einstein. Now, the truth is the only time we have for regulation is right now. But very, very quickly, that chance will run out. And when that chance for regulation runs out, we will be in a stage where all we will have left is a question of ethics. Have we given the machine enough knowledge of ethics so that they regulate? Because now they are the regulators and not us.
I hope that answers your question. Gentlemen over there, just very quickly if we can, because we are running out of time.
Yes, so thank you again. It was a really great presentation. But I just want to say that you did say that in the end there will be a utopia.
Yes.
And then are we trying to solve something that we don't need to? If I go back to the example you've used throughout, that there's the angry teenager example. No matter how many good parents you have out there, there will always be the angry child phase. So maybe we just need to outlive it, and yeah, so are we just...
If that's our choice, I'm good with that. I don't think that's a very wise choice, though. If we have the chance to be good parents, shouldn't we choose to be good parents? Have you ever seen a loving parent that starts their life by saying, you know what, my daughter's going to be annoying anyway, so I might just as well, you know, let her be annoying. That's not how it should be. The way it should be is we should say, if we did well on that blank canvas that they come to the world with, we probably have the ability to create an amazing utopia without having to sit out the angry teenage stage at all.
I hope that's answered your question. Thank you very much. I just had one to ask you. Everything you've said has been set in the landscape of presuming, and forgive me, I don't want to put words in it, but it's my observation, presuming that we have a planet on which to have these conversations.
Oh, that's a beautiful question.
Right? So
yeah.
if we don't have a planet on which to have this conversation, because you and I and the next generation are facing serious questions, it's not about, are you going to go to dance class on a Saturday, little angry teenager,
yeah.
or little toddler. It's about how are you going to survive on this planet where resilience is the key we need to pass down. So if the planet isn't how we understand it to be, where does that leave your conversation?
So the beauty of the utopia that intelligence can give us is that most of the problems we have in humanity today, most of the civilization we have is because of our intelligence. Most of the problems is because of our limited intelligence. Okay? As I said, if we are more intelligent, we would be able to go travel to Australia to surf without having to burn the atmosphere.
Damage is done though, right?
But damage can be solved with intelligence. There could be so many ways we can have a bacteria that is thrown through the air at a certain speed so that the physics heat it to the certain whatever, and basically create something with our intelligence that reverses the damage. I sit on the Oceans 2050 Foundation as an advisor, and there are amazing ways of using, for example, sea algae and growing it differently through our intelligence so that it can compensate for the mistakes. We need intelligence for that. We need artificial intelligence for that because our intelligence is limited. It's just we need to make sure that artificial intelligence is motivated to solve that problem without eliminating us in the process.
With a good heart.
Yeah, exactly.
And our parents teaching the next generation all about resilience, no doubt. Mo, thank you so much. It's been
so welcome.
Incredibly thought-provoking. Mo Gawdat, everybody, thank you.